IVM.
We are here to remind you to pay your credit card bills because paying on time is a good policy. Credit Power Play gives you a chance to win 100% cashback during the first 6 overs of both innings of any IPL match. Just pay your credit card bill and stand to win 100% cashback. Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat. Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I'm Manoj Kewalramani, and today I have with me my colleague Anupam Manur, and we're going to be talking about the reform in India's pension system. This has been a long-standing process of different sets of reforms, and we're talking about this basically because there has been a proposal to increase the limit of foreign direct investment in the Indian pension system. So Anupam, I want to first come to you to explain to me what exactly is this proposal, where is the limit at, and why do you want to increase it?
Yeah, thanks, Manoj. So what they're essentially planning to do is to increase the FDI limit in the pension sector from 49%, what it is currently, to 74%. And this has to be seen in tandem with what they did in the insurance sector, which is again increase it from 49 to 74%. Insurance they did it about in the last month, and I think the reform in the pension sector in all probability will go through in the monsoon session. So that's essentially the big reform that they've planned, and it might seem incremental, but it's not. It's actually quite a big step forward because 49% is, doesn't give you that equity holding, but 74% does for foreign investors, and that can make a big deal. But we have to also see this as a continuation of the kind of reform in the pension sector. And for that, we have to understand how the pension system is kind of structured in India, and how essentially what are the kind of issues that are there in the pension sector, and whether this will in some sense mitigate some of those problems in the pension sector.
So let's get to these issues, right? What exactly are the sort of issues that are, so currently from what I understand that, at the moment, capital inflow has been around some 26,000 crores over the last 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And now they're looking to raise it. What are the sort of issues that are associated with the pension sector? How does getting more foreign money involved in this make it better?
Yeah. So that 26,000 crores, by the way, was in the insurance sector. And these two go hand in hand, as I mentioned. And that kind of inflow of FDI has been, that's a really good figure, by the way. And that has happened because they increased it from 26% to 49% in 2015. Right. So both in the insurance and pension, they increased this limit to 49% in 2015. And since then, we've seen kind of a good uptake from foreign investors into the sector. So I think they were waiting for that kind of feedback as to what would happen, whether investors will take it up and so on. And seeing the kind of good result, they want to increase it further now from 49 to 74. So that's kind of just part A on this. But we have to, as I said, understand this pension sector, right? I think the biggest problem is that there is no universal kind of social security system in India, especially, to protect the elderly against just retirement, so loss of income in one sense, or economic deprivation, or any other kind of unforeseen event. So insurance or life insurance is just one aspect. That's still again not a government or universal kind of social security system, but that's one kind of options available, and pension again is the other. And this pension system, remember, is not universal in any sense of the term. It is highly fragmented kind of system, which still addresses a very small percentage of the entire population. So pension coverage as of now is about 7 to 10% at best, right? Which is a very small percentage. So that I think is the main problem with the pension sector. So look at who is it that they're targeting, right? So you know that firstly, it's the public sector which was always had pension system, right? Which is why, remember, why government jobs are so sought after, both historically and even today, is because all kinds of public sector jobs get pension along with it, right? So that was a massive kind of attraction, and that also massively, remember, distorts the the entire labor scenario in India, right? We see that even a small opening, even for a pune kind of job opening in the government, draws up lakhs and lakhs of applications. PhDs apply for pune jobs in India, and one of the reason is because, again, government offers pension, and the private sector not so much. The second is, yes, there's some parts of the private sector, because of the EPF and so on, offers pension. And that is still only in the organized sector, and only some of the big companies where labor laws are applicable. So we're talking about companies which hire more than 200, 300 people, or more than that, and they have, they are all organized sector and they pay their taxes and so on. They also have to offer pension in some sense in as part of the EPF and so on. So that all of that put together, as I said, we're barely talking about 10% of the population, not more than that. So the rest of them have no social security to fall back on when it comes to retirement, old age, and so on. That essentially is the problem. And remember, this again set under the context of India's demographic, right? Now, of course, we are supposedly going through this demographic dividend where we have the people below, let's say, 30 are the bulk of the population and so on. But all of these people will age and at some point or the other, right? So in 2025, and which is not too far away, we'll have about 160 million people. That's one projection, 160 million odd people who are set to be above 60. In 2030, we'll have 200 plus million people who will reach this, above 60 age, no longer working. And therefore, you need to start thinking about pension or some form of social security for these people.
Yeah, I think we've already seen in this last year or so, particularly with the pandemic, the impact, just healthcare costs with lack of pension and all this hitting the elderly, how much of a damage it can cause. And, you need that social security net. What are the sort of returns that, one gets if one is sort of invested in this?
That's actually fascinating. So the pension schemes as of now are notorious for terrible returns, right? And the same thing with both insurance and pension sector, because it was cooped up. You had basically LIC on one hand, dealing with the insurance, and you had EPFO on the other. Both of them were not run by, remember, you need professional, almost fund managers to run this to give good returns. But neither of these were actually run by professional fund managers. These were run by, some bureaucrat almost who decides what to do with that fund. So they'll go for the safest possible option, which is, invest in government bonds, long term, 10 to 15 year kind of government bonds, and that gives you middling returns at best, like 7-8%. Now, think about a person who's in the age of, let's say, 25 to 35. Manoj, I think you come just under that, or maybe not, I don't know. But let's not go there, right? Okay, let's say me, I am in that bracket. And I would want a little bit more aggressive returns. I would want my pension fund to be investing in more aggressive kind of probably stocks and equities, right? Such that I get better returns. I mean, I would be looking at 15% and so on, because that's at least what I get if I invest in the stock market over the long run, right? So you need professional fund managers, and that was lacking. Slight kind of improvement that happened in this was the NPS, the National Pension Scheme. So in 2007, NPS was been in the works since 2005, and about 3-4 years later, they opened it up not just for the apart from the government sector to pretty much anyone who, that's one great kind of thing that's happened in the last 10 years, that is opening up of the NPS to pretty much everyone. Now, NPS has definitely given you better returns than EPFO, but not as much as one would have wanted, right? So it's better, but there's still a lot to be achieved. So just in that sense, I think these kind of existing pension schemes gives you about 10%, 8%, 10% at best. And that's not good enough. That's not attractive enough for let's say, a person who's in that, below the age of 40, right? Because you still have 20 years of income ahead of you. So you'd want much more aggressive. And that preference shifts, by the way. So let's say by the time you reach 45, 50, your preference shifts, and you'd want something a lot more safer, right? You don't want to really gamble too much at that point of time. So you need fund managers who are able to understand this well, who are able to pool these resources and then employ it cleverly. And I think that was missing until now. And this could change. And this is where, again, having that FDI limit raised to 74% could mean that you would have foreign companies who are shift now, who have majority stake in these pension funds. And therefore, they'll have a lot more incentive to drop clever schemes, to drop better kind of products in the pension scheme. So that will, attract a lot more younger people. I mean, think about it, right? No 30-year-old would want to really invest in NPS. Even though that's one of the best schemes, it's not really that attractive. So now, hopefully, you'd get much more attractive kind of products and services coming out in the pension department.
So what's been, take us through the argument against FDI that has been there, because this has been something that's been going on for a very long time. So just take us through the argument against FDI and tell us how, you've already briefly told us about how it can make management much more competitive, much more efficient. It can make products much more competitive and much more attractive. What could be the potential sort of drawbacks?
The downsides really are not as much now. This is again a legacy issue, Manoj. I mean, we looked at traditionally investment in banking or other financial services generally, which is banking, insurance, pension. All of these were taught as strategic in nature, something that you shouldn't be allowing foreign companies in, and so on, right? So that there was always that fear that just one day you could have these companies exiting the market, which would mean a lot of people suffering without pension, right? That was the general idea. But I think we've progressed from that. The last 20, 30 years, we've had a lot of stability, and FDI is not something that you can, a company can just pack the bags and leave overnight, right? So a lot of that fear was also misguided in some sense. The Asian financial crisis always looms large in people's head when you're allowing, this kind of investment. But it's not really a good comparison, though, unfortunately, right? Because that was largely FPI, which is foreign portfolio investment, which also we are allowing, by the way, now. That's also increased. And so you can have a mix of these long-term investment made by foreign companies. And of course, you also need short-term investment, because that will give you that kind of, the buoyancy when it's required. So I think a lot of the fears were misguided. We could have done this at least 15 years back, if not earlier, but at least 15 years back. So we are late in that front, because a professionally managed pension fund can do a lot of wonders. I mean, it's not, just give you some ideas about the numbers, right? You have to look at how big pension funds are, let's say in the US. It's about 120% of US's economy. US's GDP rather. So, I mean, I'm doing the cardinal sin of comparing stock versus flow, but just give you an idea, right? The entire pension fund in the US is about 120% of GDP. So about 20 trillion in 2024 trillion, thereabouts in terms of numbers. We are just in billions. I mean, not even 1 trillion. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of difference in the size of the funds.
I wanted to sort of attach one more question to that. Last year, we saw this restriction placed on countries in neighboring countries with regard to FDI. What are the sort of strategic challenges of investments coming in the pension fund from countries that might be potential adversaries, or with whom we have a far more adversarial relationship right now? I mean, like China.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, you could still, if people are scared about that, you could still place that restriction. You could, for instance, just say that investment coming in from China will, or neighboring countries, as we did, we can no longer go through the automatic route. So you're not necessarily banning it, but it will require one additional level of review. And I think that's fair enough. At least it will assuage people's fears in some sense, even the government's their own. But that's no excuse to stop, let's say, excess liquidity coming in from the US or from Europe, right? Because we know for fact that in the last 10, 15 years, if you look, right, interest rates in US and in Europe has been just about 1% or hovering around 0 and 1%. So therefore, a lot of liquidity was there, and all of that has gone into, let's say, equity around the world, and even Indian equity. Basically, when you look at Sensex and Nifty, how well they've been doing. A large part of that has been that excess liquidity, right? But if we had a pension fund which was open to foreign investment, I think we would have seen a lot more kind of investment in that sector, and that would have bode well for long-term investment into a lot of other aspects in the Indian economy. So let me just close that kind of loop and talk about what else can a good pension fund do, right?
Yeah.
And or a buoyant kind of pension fund do. One of the key aspects, as I was saying, how big a role that pension funds can play in other countries is that when you have so this is how it would work, right? If you have FDI in pension funds, the hope is that they will be better able to, they'll bring their expertise, they'll bring their fresher innovations and products into India, which will then bring more people into this scheme, right, into the pension kind of entire net. And so being able to look at what has happened in the mutual funds kind of space in the last 10 years or so, right? People who were not investing in mutual funds or stocks at all before, now you're seeing a lot of these people investing. So look at mutualfundsahere.com, for example. We are bombarded with those ads, but that's a great thing. They are reaching out to people who had never before invested in mutual funds. And I think a similar kind of revolution can be seen in the pension funds, right? People who had never thought about pension or who were investing in gold, for instance, or real estate as some form of social security can now start investing in pension. And I think that would be what that's exactly what we should look out for. And that would be a massive kind of victory in that sense. So let's say you have a lot of people now who are slowly getting into that entire pension fund market, a lot of people investing in their pensions, and foreign companies are able to mobilize some of this better. There's better competition, better products. And so you have now a big kind of pension fund, right? Now that can be used for essentially, once you mobilize the savings, which was not done in financial sector before, now once you start mobilizing the savings, that can be used for long-term corporate investment, maybe, right? The corporate bond market, they can choose to invest there. They can choose, and this is crucial, they can choose to invest in infrastructure. Now, look at the infrastructure sector, which is always requiring long-term funds, right? But unfortunately, they borrow from banks, which is not meant to give out such kind of long-term funds. And pension, on the other hand, is also looking for long-term investment for long-term kind of gains, right? Look at, again, a person who's investing in 30 needs that money only at 60. Here, you're looking at a 30-year project in infrastructure. Actually, these two are meant for each other. So if you have good kind of pension funds, it'll also help in investing in infrastructure, for instance. And infrastructure is just one example. It could be corporate investment. It could be a whole bunch of other investments that takes place. But the idea is that, look at India's situation. Savings rate has been falling, especially savings. Financial sector savings has been dropping massively. Now it's about 7% of GDP. Overall savings rate as well has fallen to 20%, etc. Investment rate has been falling. So I think this kind of push that you get from both the insurance and pension scheme can kind of mitigate that.
All right. So long run, the idea is that if you open this up, you get more capital, you can get better efficiency, you can get much more attractive products. For old folks like me, we can have greater security. For young folks like you can have more options and much more attractive options. And of course, the spillover effects into investments in other domains, is also something that we should be looking at, because that's something that we don't tend to end up looking at in the long term. And we just think of this narrow bit of what's happening to the pension sector.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. So one just final point on top of all of this, right? The biggest kind of positive consequence of this could also be on the fiscal deficit, because we know that one of the biggest expenditures or items in the government of India's expenditure is pensions, both at the state level and at the union level. So that's a revenue expenditure. Sometimes, with something like OROP on the defense side, and even otherwise pensions with the pay commissions coming up, etc. Some of this, I think, can be, taken off the government's balance sheets, and you give options. It's about time that you also give options to public sector employees to go out and invest in their own pension. That not all of it has to be paid by the government itself, right? So I think that kind of reform also has to take place. for this to be complete, and therefore that will again decrease the burden on the fiscal deficit, on the fiscal side for the government, and it's inevitable. This has to be done at some point. So this is the reason. I mean, if you look at, for example, Chile's economy and what they did, right? They also essentially moved. They were in a kind of probably they were in a worse situation, but they realized that having entirely government-backed pension schemes are no longer tenable. It's just not sustainable for the economy, and therefore they moved to a kind of this private sector. So I think going ahead, it's inevitable that some part of public sector pensions have to be privatized in this sense, and and that if it is better managed, etc., people won't lose out really. They can actually make better returns in the long run.
Awesome. So with that, we're going to call it a day. Thank you so much, Anupam, for explaining all of that to us.
Yeah, thanks, Manoj. My pleasure. And
Thanks.
If you're interested in all of these macroeconomic aspects of savings, investment, GDP, how does it all tie together? Of course, we teach all of this, at least partially, in our GCPP program. Applications are open now. Please do check out our website, takshila.org.in/courses. We also have the 1-year program where we'll be able to deep dive a lot more into macroeconomics, if at all that is of interest to you.
All right. So with that, we're going to call it a day. Thank you so much, folks. Do check out the website. The applications, like Anupam said, are open. It'll be what we can promise is a enriching learning experience and lots of conversations with Anupam. Thanks so much. The Takshashila Institution is an independent, non-partisan think tank and a school of public policy. We have education programs lasting 1 semester and 1 year that are tailored specifically for people like you. They are all online and you can take them from anywhere. Admissions are now open for our 12-week graduate certificate program in public policy, defense and foreign affairs, technology policy, and health and life sciences. Visit takshashila.org.in/courses to find out more. If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, thewholetruthfoods.com, PayPal, Cred, and Ciat. Thank you so much for working with us. We really appreciate it. First up this week, let me tell you about Cyrus Says. We featured popular YouTuber and actor Prajakta Kohli, who took us through her journey of content creation. We also had conversations with Vasanthi Hariprakash and Sachin Kalbag this week. Really great conversations. Do check those out. Vineet Kanabar goes solo this time on Storytellers and Storysellers as he talks about his favorite IPL ads and how brands have been making content around the Cricket League. On The Habit Coach, Ashton was joined by Arjun and Somesh of the Fighting Goat podcast to talk about fitness for combat sports like the mixed martial arts. On Nankari, Sadaf and Archit discussed the diet and lifestyle of athletes with the host of the Millennial Athlete, Shok Ramchandra, who is also a pro badminton player and coach. Ambarana opens the 4th season of Know Your Kanun with a list of things he has planned on the show for us, including episodes on immigration law and on career prospects for law students. The IPL season's on and we've definitely got you covered. Tune into the Edges and Sledges podcast if you're looking for English, and if you're looking to listen to something in Hindi, definitely check out Khel Neeti. Both are great shows with great takes. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, host of the Empowering Series podcast on the IVM network. I happen to be a peak performance coach and leadership coach by profession, and I'm here to share with you productivity tools, life-altering techniques, and real-life hacks to help you achieve your maximum potential in everything you do, your relationships, professions, careers. So tune in every Monday to unleash your inner power. Be safe, be well, be empowered.